Kenyans are angry at their president. Last year, thousands of young Kenyans hit the streets in protest at the rising cost of living and a controversial finance bill put forward by President William Ruto. The government's response? A violent crackdown that left dozens dead and sent shockwaves throughout the country. And while the president ultimately backtracked and withdrew the bill,
I have this to say to Kenyans. I have heard you, and I have heard you clearly.
many claim that his government continues to stifle dissent and is behind a spate of abductions that have targeted Ruto's critics. My guest tonight is Kimani Ichung'wah, Majority Leader of the Kenyan National Assembly. He's been in Parliament for more than a decade, is a close ally of President Ruto, and has been a staunch defender of the president's policies. I'm Mehdi Hasan, and tonight I'll go head-to-head with Kimani Ichung'wah. I'll challenge him on his government's brutal crackdown on protesters, on rampant corruption, and on whether President Ruto is really the leader Kenyans want. I'll also be joined by three experts: Awino Okech, Professor of Feminist and Security Studies at University of London-SOAS, Irungu Houghton, Executive Director of Amnesty International Kenya, and Moses Langat, Kenyan community leader in the diaspora based in the UK. Kimani Ichung'wah, thank you so much for joining me here on Head to Head. You are the majority leader in the Kenyan National Assembly. You are a close ally and supporter of President William Ruto, who is super unpopular right now because he and you and your party haven't delivered for the people of Kenya. Your 2022 election manifesto made 281 promises. Can you tell our audience tonight how many of those have been fulfilled over the last 2.5 years?
True, as you say. The perception out there is that the administration is quite unpopular, nothing uncharacteristic of any administration 2 years after an election, especially an administration that came into office in the backdrop of a very dilapidated economy with very many promises, as you said, but I can assure you that will change in due course. The implementation of a manifesto is page by page, chapter after chapter.
But you haven't implemented it. That's the problem.
It is being implemented.
How many of the 281 promises have been implemented?
I'll not give you a straight answer of 2 or 10 or 200, but I'll tell you.
You're the first politician who said to me, I will not give you a straight answer, just bluntly. I can give you an answer. I've got the answer. It's 14 out of 281 promises. That means 95% of your promises have not been met 2.5 years in.
That is your number, Mehdi, not my number.
It's not my number. It's the number of Mizalendo, a non-partisan parliamentary monitoring organization in Kenya that tracks all parties. They're saying 14 out of 281. I mean, we can run through some of them. President Ruto said he would give free internet and phone calls to Kenyans. He hasn't. He said he would start an inquiry into cronyism. He has not. He said he would ratify the International Convention Against Enforced Disappearances. He has not. I could go on and on. Kenyans are frustrated because they were lied to during the election campaign.
Well, Mehdi, as I told you, that is the perspective of Mzalendo. And that is their target.
Well, has he ratified the International Convention Against Enforced Disappearances?
We have ratified very many international conventions.
But has he ratified the International Convention Against Enforced? He said he would do it straight as he comes to power. It's been 2.5 years. He could do it with a stroke of his pen. Why has he not done it?
He is yet to ratify, but it is work in progress. Was there a timeline for its ratification, according to Mzalendo?
Many things had timelines on.
Was there a timeline?
He said he would
do. No timeline.
He said he would do a public inquiry into cronyism within 30 days. Has he done it?
Public inquiry?
Yeah, a public inquiry to establish the extent of cronyism and state capture and make recommendations. Page 61 of your manifesto. Has he done it? It's been more than 30 days. It's been 2.5 years.
I'll tell you, Mehdi, if you read the NADCO report, there are recommendations on what is to be done on state cronyism, on state capture, on extrajudicial killings. That is captured in the NADCO report.
But you haven't done what the manifesto called for on multiple things. And look, you know, and you admitted, to be fair, that people are unhappy. There's a perception of the government that's unpopular. Kenyans have been most upset about the cost of living. And yet, when thousands of young Kenyans took to the streets in protest of your government last year, the finance bill, your government opened fire on them, killed them, forcibly abducted and disappeared them. How do you justify such a violent crackdown on your own citizens in a democracy?
First, let me say this, Mehdi. As you said, because you never allowed me to answer the question on the promises kept. I told you the manifesto is being implemented chapter after chapter, right from housing to the cost of living that you're speaking about. Because, of course, you cannot judge what was to be done in 5 years, in a short 2 years.
Well, some of them you said you would do in 30 days, and you haven't. But just deal with the violence. How do you justify what happened last summer in Kenya?
Now I'm coming to that. You said the cost of living. I can tell you what we've done with the cost of living, from the subsidizing of production rather than subsidizing consumption, as we promised in our campaigns. You remember the first demonstrations after the elections in 2023 were about the cost of living.
Which also were greeted with violence from the state.
And unfortunately, all demonstrations end up with deaths, which is a very unfortunate incident. And it is not true that people demonstrate and you open fire. It is just the nature of what happens with our demonstrations, that they turn violent, and the police have to intervene. And let me say that at this point, it's not just unfortunate. We all regret the loss of life during the 2022 demonstrations and even the demonstrations of June last year. Unfortunate that lives had to be lost, but it was not that fire was opened on young.
Yeah, the way you talk, lives had to be lost. No, lives were taken. Right? People were shot in the head.
No life ought to have been lost, and nobody can justify the loss of life anywhere in the world out of demonstrations of.
According to a Reuters investigation, 19-year-old Charles Awino went to a protest, was killed with a gunshot to the head. The police recorded his death as a road accident. 21-year-old Shaquille Obienge, he died the same day as Awino, also shot in the neck. Police recorded his death as a road accident. If these deaths are so regrettable, why is the Kenyan police covering them up?
Fortunately, Mehdi, we have a very robust constitution in the country, the best constitution in sub-Saharan Africa. This constitution has very good and clear safeguards that make sure that everybody is held to account for your actions, including the police. You've mentioned 2 or 3 people. I think from IPOA's records, the Independent Police Oversight Authority, from their records, they have recorded about 60 deaths from last year's demonstrations. And there are some, I think about 30-something, that are still under investigation. They have dismissed some after close the files after investigation. Therefore, I can assure you, the police may, even somebody within the police force may desire to cover up.
Can you tell our audience tonight, how many Kenyan police officers
in the country will not allow you to cover up?
You say that, this is great rhetoric. How many police officers in Kenya have been prosecuted for their role in the violence in 2023 or 2024? Can you tell us how many?
I'll tell you from the last year's demonstrations, 3 are already in court.
3 police officers have been prosecuted?
3 are being prosecuted.
Are being prosecuted, but none have been prosecuted.
Another 34 cases. Before you prosecute somebody, you have got to investigate. So you have to investigate.
This is what Human Rights Watch said last year. Bodies of people showing signs of torture continue to turn up in rivers, forests, quarries, mortuaries. The authorities have yet to investigate or prosecute anyone for these crimes. Kenya has a history of police brutality and lack of accountability for serious abuse.
So
that's Human Rights Watch.
You want to believe what Human Rights Watch said, not what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because
I'm going to believe a human rights group over a politician who started by saying, I won't give you straight answers.
It is their take, Mehdi. It is their take. And I didn't come here to give their take. I came here to give my take and the perspective.
So they're wrong, you think? The police officers are being held to account?
They're wrong because the police officers must be held to account.
But they haven't been.
And that is why we have institutions that will hold them to account.
So what you said today about the deaths sounded good. You said it's regrettable, there should be no loss of life. That's what you say here. What you say in Kenya is a little bit different. This is what you said in December about the abductions of young people. You said that they're a way for people to basically con the system. You said these people, quote, they're not really abducted, you said, quote, they're locking themselves in Airbnbs with their girlfriends and hiding. Are you saying that all these abductions, Kenyan parents crying over missing children, bodies turning up in rivers, that's people pretending, hiding with their girlfriends in an Airbnb? Do you understand how offensive that sounds?
Mehdi, I was speaking in Bungoma County. And the context was the clamor for, there was the misconception that every other abduction in the country was being perpetuated by security agencies. But what I said is that we have laws in the country that people who are construed to have broken the law in terms of the Computer Misuse and Cybercrimes Act, if they are found culpable, the DCI or the police should and must arrest them and take them before courts of law, because that is what they deserve. And the police and security agencies have no business abducting anybody, and nobody should be abducted.
But they are abducting people.
By security agencies.
But they are abducting.
Allow me to make my point, because you asked me a question. And it is in that context then that I said, and again, it is not all cases, Mehdi, that were out of abductions or what was construed to be abductions. And let me tell you, there were cases where people, somebody was holed up in an Airbnb, but reported himself as abducted.
But for you as a leading politician in the country, where people are being disappeared in a democracy in 2024, 2025, it seems a strange thing to focus on, not the kids whose bodies are being found in rivers and forests and warehouses with gunshot wounds to the head and the neck. And instead of focusing on that, you focus on one case of somebody in an Airbnb. Seems strange.
Mehdi, I also say there are cases of political conspiracies where people...
Can we talk about the cases that are open and shut, police, intelligence services abducting kids? You accept that happens in your country?
I will.
Your government and your intelligence services have abducted innocent people. You accept that?
It has been claimed. Those are matters.
Not claimed, it's happened.
It has been claimed.
You don't accept it's happened?
I do not believe there are enforced disappearances perpetuated by the state in Kenya. Not in this day and age. We have an administration which, for the first time, none other than the president himself committed that never again will Kenyans have to disappear and you fish their bodies out of River Yala or River Tana like happened some time back. And therefore, why I say they are claims, but it's because they are claims that are being investigated.
They're not claims. Let me give you a fact. Can I give you a fact?
Unless you give me a fact.
I'm going to give you a fact right now, because the audience around the world watching may not know this. The Attorney General of Kenya, his son was abducted. Literally a serving member of the government. His son was taken. How did he get him released? Can you tell our audience?
The Attorney General of Kenya is called Dorcas Oduor.
Justin Muturi, the former Attorney General,
he's been abducted. The person who has alleged that his son was abducted is the former Attorney General, Justin Muturi. And
how did he get his son released?
And I'll tell you again, I have read from the media, heard Justin Muturi what he said, just as you heard it. It is an allegation by Justin Muturi, somebody who has...
Justin Muturi says he went to the president and said, President Ruto, the intelligence service has taken my son. President Ruto called the head of your intelligence service and his son was released.
Have you heard, Mehdi, from President Ruto on the same? Have you heard from the director of intelligence on the same?
You tell me what's President Ruto's... Has he denied it?
Have you heard from him?
No, I don't live in Kenya. You're the expert. Has President Ruto denied that?
Why don't you allow then me to tell you my
take?
Do. Because that's your take.
Please.
From what has been reported.
That's not my take. I'm reporting a member of your government. This is amazing. I'm quoting a member of your government, not the opposition, a member of your government who you're calling a liar because he says his son was abducted.
That's why I told you Justin Muturi, the former Attorney General and current Minister for Public Service, is a politician to begin with, has beef with his boss. In the government he serves.
Wow. So he made up a story about his son being abducted.
There are reasons. Wow,
Kenyan politics.
Will you allow me
Please.
to make my points?
Please, this is just, I'm stunned.
There are reasons why Justin Muturi was removed as Attorney General around the time of the demonstrations in June of last year. There are reasons probably why Justin Muturi knows he's probably on his way out. It is him who has made those allegations. That is a matter under active investigations. As I told you,
has President Ruto denied it?
We have got, you will need probably to invite him and ask him.
You can't
I am not President William Ruto, neither am I his spokesperson.
Has he denied it? It's a simple factual question, yes or no?
I have not heard him, and I don't know if he has been asked to...
So one of the... I just want to recap for our viewers, just to be followed. A minister in the Kenyan government has said that his son was abducted by the intelligence services and the president of Kenya had to intervene to release his son. You suggest the minister is lying and on his way out, but the president hasn't denied any of this happened.
I don't suggest. I tell you emphatically, the minister has reasons to lie. Emphatically. He has reasons to
And he's
lie.
on his way out?
He definitely knows it.
All right, Justin Mature, if you're watching, you
And-
may want to put your resume out there. 'Cause
Let me tell you, Mehdi.
Okay.
Let me tell you, because it's all politics.
even the abduction of his son is politics.
It is all politics. He's playing politics with a very unfortunate incident.
Let's bring in our panel now to see what they think about all of this. I'm going to go first to Irungu Houghton, who is the Executive Director of Amnesty International Kenya. Irungu, your organization has been documenting a lot of these abductions. You yourself, I believe, have spoken to some of the abductees and their families. Kimani suggests that this is kind of water under the bridge. There's no real evidence for now. A lot of it is politics. What's your view?
I mean, I think there has been a trend of targeting dissent, people who have protested in our streets, excessive use of force against people essentially just expressing the right to assembly. And in one case, for example, this young man was essentially held incommunicado. He was stripped naked. He was shaved, not just on top of his head, but in his pubic areas. He was interrogated ad nauseum about who his connections were, and all he had done was to post cartoons and artificially generated images onto the on his Twitter handle.
Images of what, can I ask?
Of the president in a casket.
Is that appropriate? Somebody makes fun of the president in Kenya and they get tortured like this?
When William Ruto became president, when the buck stopped at his desk, he took decisive action to end the extrajudicial killings that were happening. True, what Irungu says is true. There was a case of about, I don't know if there were 3 or 4 young Kenyans who were allegedly abducted, and it went out that
Not allegedly. They were abducted.
They were abducted, as it was reported. They returned back to their families. There was one case where one of them turned back, appeared in a disco at night with a fully charged phone. So you need to ask yourself where
I don't understand what the battery power of phones has to do with torture and human rights in Kenya.
If I am abducted and kept incommunicado without a phone or anything, I do not expect you to have a fully charged phone and to reappear after 2 weeks.
Do you deny they were tortured? I mean, Irungu just described horrific torture.
I am not denying anything if you listen to me, and please listen to me keenly, because as I said, Mehdi, there are cases of abductions. As to who is abducting people is a question.
They say the police. Am I wrong, Irungu? They saying security services.
They say so. The police say it is not us. So what do we do in a country with institutions that work? Allow the investigative agencies and institutions to investigate and get to check who has abducted who.
So on that note, I just want to bring in some more panelists. It's a good point to raise there. Awino Okech is a professor of feminist and security studies at the University of London-SOAS. Kimani says, what do you do in a country where the institutions work? And I want to ask you, do the institutions work in Kenya? Is there accountability? What is your perspective?
I think we must begin by recognizing, Mr. Ichung'wah, that there's a huge trust deficit with the Ruto regime. You earlier on spoke about the fact that you're 2 years into a 5-year term. We're all employees. Some of us are employees. Your employer does not wait for you to reach your end of contract to tell you, have you performed well or not? We all have performance reviews and performance contracts. And I think the citizens who voted for you are saying things are not working. I do not believe that institutions are working effectively, because if I tell you that people are being abducted outside your house and you say it's not my people, then your answer should be to tell us who those are. You're not giving Kenyans any confidence if you say it's not the police, it's not the NIS, but somehow we don't know who they are. And we're supposed to automatically assume that that's fine since it's not the police and National Intelligence Service. Trust must be rebuilt, Mr. Ichung'wah, if we are to trust the Ruto government.
Do you want to respond to Awino?
Yes, and I agree with her that trust must be earned, not actually rebuilt. You earn your trust from your actions, and that is why it is only right that we allow the institutions to investigate so that those who claim they have been abducted, because as I said, there are criminal elements that have been involved. And I remember last year, at the heat of the youth demonstrations in June last year, I think around July or August, if I'm not wrong, bodies were discovered in a place called Kware in Embakasi, just outside the airport in Nairobi. And it turned out that somebody, some sort of crazy serial killer, was killing ladies and dumping their bodies there. Therefore, you can imagine what would have happened if we were all quick to judge and say, yes, these are protesters, young protesters, in the backdrop of what was happening then, who have disappeared and now their bodies are dumped there.
Before I go to our third panelist who's been waiting patiently, just Irungu, very quickly, just comparing, Kimani seems to be suggesting that pre-2022, there was lots of bad stuff, and since then things have improved. As someone who's covered multiple governments over multiple years, do you agree with that?
No. I mean, I think what has happened in the last 6 months has been really remarkable and very scary for many Kenyans. 89 abductions, 63 deaths, 29 still missing. These are not normal times. I mean, if you put together the number of people who were killed in 2023 and 2024, that is 4 times the number that were killed during the multi-partyism period and the struggle for multi-partyism. So we've seen a real jump in these figures. But it's not just the figures, it's just what happens to a family, to a community whose young one has had their life ripped from them. So I think we have to get beyond the numbers to just think about what does it mean for the people that you mentioned that are finding their way in body bags in mortuaries in Kenya. It has to stop.
Moses Langat, I want to bring in. You are a community leader, Kenyan community leader in the diaspora. I believe you're also one of the authors of the party manifesto in 2022. So I do want to ask you the same question I asked Kimani at the start. What do you make of this study that was done by a non-partisan group, which shows 14 promises out of 281 in the manifesto have been fulfilled? Do you think that's what's driving a lot of Kenyan frustration?
Mehdi, first and foremost, we need to understand that the president has decided to be a leader, not to be a politician. I want to say that regarding the youth protests, they started a conversation with the president. He listened to them. The youth said they wanted part of the finance bill to be altered. The president listened to them. They had conversation. In fact, members of the parliament went back. They redrafted the finance bill. There were no shootings while they were asking for the changes. Trouble only started when we started having people going in to interfere. We had politicians going in. The youngsters, whom we appreciate, form over 75% of Kenya's population. About 12% of them are unemployed.
Protests were politically motivated, not driven by organic anger from young people?
The young people were angry. These are well-educated people. They have nothing to do. These are the messes that the current government inherited. And through the bottom-up economic transformation agenda, which the president always talks about, and he prioritized 5 areas, is to create jobs for these people, to create things to do.
You keep saying inherited. Isn't President Ruto, wasn't he a long-standing senior member of the previous government?
Well,
how do you inherit something you were in?
Mehdi.
Listen, Mehdi.
What am I missing?
Mehdi, let me just explain, because post-2017, William Ruto was deputy president just by name.
Okay.
That's a fact of life.
Fine.
And therefore, when the
Fair
panelist speaks about inheritance, he knows.
I do want to talk more about President Ruto. We're going to do that in the second half of this show. Right now, we're going to take a break. When we come back in part 2, we'll carry on talking to Kimani Ichung'wah and to our panel. We're going to hear from our very patient audience here in London's Conway Hall. See you after the break. Welcome back to Head to Head on Al Jazeera English. My guest today is Kimani Ichung'wah. He is the majority leader in Kenya's National Assembly and a close ally of President William Ruto. Kimani, we've been talking about the protests and the violence and police accountability in part 1. Let's talk about Kenyan politics in more detail. Last year, the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project named ousted Syrian dictator Bashar al-Assad as the most corrupt leader in the world. There were 5 other finalists, though. Out of those 5, can you tell me who received the most votes?
You tell me.
William Ruto received the most votes.
Who was voting?
A lot of Kenyans voted, actually. They submitted his name to the OCCRP. I mean, you have a real corruption problem in Kenya, and you ran on a platform. I just want to quote you to our viewers, and you can respond. You said, we shall not just speak about corruption, but we shall act. President Ruto said something similar during the election campaign in 2022. And yet last year, a US government report said that Kenya has failed to implement its anti-corruption laws, and the country has dropped 3 spots in Transparency International's annual corruption index. That is pretty embarrassing for your party, your government, is it not?
Pretty embarrassing for any country to be ranked anyhow in terms of corruption perception. Mehdi, it's true. I said we will not talk about corruption, we will act. If you live in the Kenyan soil today, you will know close to 18,000 public services now are digitized, principally to try and preempt corrupt practices, because it is in provision of services where people get engaged into corruption and corrupt activities. Two, I will tell you, not a single mega scandal. Look at all previous administrations in Kenya, right from the Kenyatta one, the Moi regime, 24 years, to the Kibaki regime, to the Uhuru Kenyatta regime.
But you have dropped.
There were mega scandals.
So why have you dropped 3 places in the annual corruption rate?
Not a single mega scandal.
You made that point. I'm not disputing that.
Last 2 years.
I'm asking why you've dropped 3 places in the annual ranking.
Because the indexes are based on perception. Today, Mehdi, when you ran out an advert that I was going to appear on this show, you have seen what has happened on Twitter, in Kenya and globally. Yeah.
Obviously, every politician has their critic.
Even on the Al Jazeera page. Because Kenyans are like that. Kenyans are very participatory and active. And therefore,
so your country just looks corrupt because Kenyans are very vocal. Is that what you're saying?
Ask Kenyans, if you announce today that you're doing a corruption perception here today, and ask them, is Kimani Ichung'wah corrupt? They will all storm your pages and perceive me to be corrupt.
We'll come back to you in a moment.
Ask them to give you evidence of a single corruption case.
So hold on.
Against Kimani Ichung'wah, they will not. The same for William Ruto. They will not give you a single scandal of corruption under this administration.
You say it's Kenyan perception. But it's not just Kenyan perception.
I quote, here's the perception driven by an active citizen.
No, if you let me finish a sentence, I'll tell you, US Trade Representative in 2024, the US government, ally of Kenya, said US firms routinely report direct requests for bribes from all levels of the Kenyan government.
And
are they just passionate?
You will remember when that was said, action was taken. We did not just talk about it.
So you just ended bribery from all levels of the Kenyan government.
And very senior officers of the Ministry of Trade lost their jobs.
Let me ask you about President Ruto. You mentioned President Ruto. He positions himself as an outsider. I think he likes to call himself a hustler, a man who's separate to the Kenyan political elites, the political dynasties, the Kenyattas, the Odingas. But is he that different, Kimani? Because he's been in politics for nearly 30 years, longer than even President Kenyatta. He's amassed a lot of wealth during his time in politics. I believe he owns luxury hotels, a 2,500-acre farm, a poultry plant. He's invested in hotels. Isn't that part of why Kenyans are so frustrated with their government? They see these rich elites in charge, making money while they suffer.
Well, he was seen as an outsider in the sense that he came from a family that was relatively unknown. Nobody knew who his father was. Nobody knew who his mother was. Unlike those he was competing with who came from families that were political families, well-known, wealthy backgrounds, and he came as a hustler, someone who had hustled his way from the bottom up, and that's why he sold himself, and he's seen as an outsider in terms of where he's coming from.
I think Kenyans are fine with him hustling himself into the...
It doesn't mean, Mehdi, that if I was born into a family of poverty, I should live and die in poverty. I also wasn't born in a very affluent family, but I'm working very hard, and I work very hard every day. The day I make it, I fake it till I make it, and the day I make it...
Are you talking about yourself?
Are you going to say I'm also corrupt?
Hold on, are you saying yourself? You're talking about yourself for a moment.
Yeah, I also...
Recently, an MP from your party joked that you were worth 5 billion shillings, or $38 million. Is that correct?
Joked, and not from my party. It's actually from the other party.
So can you clarify then, what is your net worth?
Well, not 5 billion, definitely.
For 1 billion?
Probably about close to 1 billion.
And that's fine, because a lot of people, as you know better than me, you're the majority leader of the Kenyan National Assembly, that Kenyan MPs are among the highest paid in the world in relative terms. People are very upset seeing a lot of MPs flaunting their wealth. They're doing TikToks, they're doing Twitter videos showing their luxury cars, and Kenyans are furious. You know this on social media. They're upset because the MPs are flaunting their wealth.
Again, Mehdi, it matters person to person. I have never had to flaunt anything because I have nothing to flaunt.
People in your party have, obviously.
But not just in my party.
I know, but you're the majority leader, so I'm asking you, how do you feel about that?
It's rather unfortunate nobody should do that, and I think a number of those who have done that, by the way, have regretted what they had to show the public.
But the flaunting's only secondary. What about the wealth itself? Why do you have so many wealthy Kenyan MPs?
Well, that's a question I cannot be able to answer. If you ask me about my wealth, I'll tell you, and my wealth is largely not from my salary. And anything and
You're worth
everything.
about $7 million, you said.
$7 million.
You said about a billion shillings.
Just about $1 billion shillings.
And when you look at the average salary of a Kenyan, and they look at a Kenyan MP who gets 32 times the average salary,
that is a perception.
Furious.
That is a perception, Mehdi, I'm telling you. Don't look at what someone is earning today vis-a-vis. I wasn't born an MP. I just arrived in the public scene having had another life. Worked in other organizations other than in politics, done business over the years. Therefore, the perception that people who are in public service should not own or should not have any other thing other than what they earn from their public service jobs.
You know very well that's not the issue. The issue is they see people in public life making money out of their public connections. Awino Okech is a professor of feminist and security studies at the University of London-SOAS. Kimani says that President Ruto is a transformative figure. Kenya's had a lot of presidents over the last couple of decades, some pretty big names who've had pretty big impacts, good and bad, on Kenya. Where do you rank Ruto?
That's a difficult question to answer, largely because Ruto also served in the previous government. So his record beyond the previous government, but also his long-standing political career, means that he's being judged on a very different scale. One of the biggest weaknesses of the current government is the way that those who have been assigned by the president to deliver that plan talk to Kenyans, engage with Kenyans like Kenyans do not know what they're talking about, are dismissive of their pain, are dismissive of the deaths of the children that we saw being shot in front of Parliament during the June 25th protests. You want Kenyans to believe in the plan, treat Kenyans with the necessary respect that they treated you with when they voted you into office. Number two, presidents do not deliver a plan for the people that voted them. They deliver a plan for the entire country, whether we voted for them or not.
Let me bring in Moses Langat, who's a Kenyan community leader in the diaspora, helped with the manifesto in 2022. The poll that came out in December in Kenya, where the people were asked, how much trust do you have in the ability of these people, different institutions, to fulfill their mandate? The president, do you know how many Kenyans said a lot of trust in the president? 1% of Kenyans said they have a lot of trust. That must worry you as a Ruto supporter.
No, not at all. Mehdi, let me tell you something. Ruto went in with a plan. His plan, and I repeat, was called Bottom-Up Economic Transformation Agenda Plan. He set to reduce the cost of living. He said, I will work on productivity and production in the country. And he said he will make the goods and services for all Kenyans to be affordable. Kenya, in August 2022, when the president was coming in, were busy importing maize, sugar, rice, cooking oil, almost importing everything. The government has transformed the sector. In July alone.
Moses, with respect, you sound a bit like the Biden administration, where I live in the US, where the economy's great, but the public don't believe you. The public don't trust you.
I'm giving you microeconomics. In July, Kenya produced 84,000 metric tons of sugar, more than what we need. Kenya is almost becoming a net exporter of sugar, something we were importing. So you believe
these economic trends, positive ones, will turn around his popularity?
I will tell you many more.
Okay, well, we don't have time for many more, but you've given us some. Let me bring in Irungu Houghton, who is Executive Director at Amnesty in Kenya. I just want to bring up one thing we haven't talked about when we talk about William Ruto's record is he was indicted by the International Criminal Court over the 2007 elections and the violence that followed that led to the deaths of 1,300 Kenyans. Ruto was never actually cleared of the charges. The prosecution had to drop the case, they said, because of witness intimidation. The ICC prosecutor called it a dark day for international criminal justice. Today, she was forced to drop charges against Ruto and others. Given that background, are you surprised at all that there's been so much violence in Kenya recently?
I think I think it's important to give that history, but I think more importantly is really to look at what's happened over the last 2 years. And there are growing calls for international mechanisms to be invoked. And Article 15 of the International Criminals Act. As Amnesty International, we have essentially focused on trying to build domestic accountability in the Kenyan courts, but increasingly finding that that is being stopped either by the constant call for deferrals, for plea taking, and the delayed justice for so many people that have suffered at the hands of police officers is leading a lot of people to begin to get weary and to think about regional mechanisms and international mechanisms. And I think it's really important, particularly for Honourable Kimani Ichung'wah and the members of parliament, to recognize that if we cannot get justice in the courts of Kenya, then it is inevitable that people will start to look back at the International Criminal Court. I don't know what you have to say to that, Honourable Ichung'wah.
Is it inevitable that you end up back at the ICC if Kenyan justice is not working? I mean, you have a president who was indicted not long ago. Are you worried that he might end up back at the International Criminal Court?
Mehdi, let me say I agree with Irungu first that we must build our own institutions and make them work. After the 2024 demonstrations and the infiltration by treasonous criminals of those demonstrations, investigators did their work and they were able to identify particular political actors who mobilized the criminals to come and visit the wanton destruction that you saw around the city. When the particular politicians were arrested and were to be charged to court, they ran to court and get injunctive or conservatory orders against their prosecution, and those are the frustrations that you hear Irogo speak about. Therefore, we must relook at ourselves inwards, right from the judiciary and all other arms of government, to make sure that each and every arm of government works the way it's supposed to work.
But are you worried that if they don't work, the ICC could be back for your president?
We have no choice but to make them work, Mehdi. That is why I took time to travel all the way from Nairobi to come and have this conversation with you here, head to head.
Okay, let's go to our audience who've been waiting very patiently. I'll take a question from the, yes, lady here in the last, yes, on the edge, yes.
On a recent visit to Kenya just last month, I witnessed low-level corruption happening right in front of my eyes. It's something that's not going away. If anything, it seems to be rampant. What, if anything, can the Kenyan government do to actually crack down on this? Because it's, at the end of the day, working people who feel it the most.
Do you mind me asking, just an example of what kind of corruption you saw?
Well, on a traffic, when you're in the cars and you're driving, this was particularly in Nairobi, there's certain officers, traffic officers, I think, I don't know their exact name, but they commonly take bribes. And my uncle that was driving was just saying that this happens all the time.
First, I hope your uncle did not pay the bribe. But
to clarify,
on a serious
note.
On a serious note,
yeah,
I asked Raila Odinga this question. I'll ask you, have you had to pay a bribe for anything in Kenya?
I have never paid for a bribe.
In your entire life, you've never paid a bribe?
In my entire life, I have never paid for a bribe.
Sorry, a little bit. Some of the Kenyans here are not believing you, but okay.
Let me tell you, and just to answer, it takes two to tango. Yeah, it takes the bribe taker and the bribe giver.
But the bribe giver is in a position of weakness sometimes.
Exactly, because why are policemen collecting bribes on the road? Because you're on the wrong. Maybe you are speaking on your phone.
No, that's not how it works, Kimani. You know very well people exploit their positions of power to force people into certain positions.
I have been stopped by a policeman for speeding on the road. I have, unfortunately, I was only 19 or 20 years old. And I explained myself out of the situation. You never need to pay a bribe. But just to answer the good lady's question, in the last 2 years, we have digitized 18,000 government services. You will not digitize policemen manning the roads, but it is possible to have instant fines. And the Ministry of Public Transport and Infrastructure is working on a traffic system where people can pay instant fines so that you do not have to pay a bribe to get away, because it is an inconvenience that makes people pay bribes.
Okay, let's get the lady there in the black top and the third row. Yes, you, if you want to stand up.
Hi. Your party seems to be very concerned with the criticism on social media Why are you more sensitive to this than to the everyday troubles of the Kenyans, such as the rising cases of femicide, the abductions, corruptions?
True, we are very concerned, and I said I'm actually the one who in this show spoke to the issue of femicide because it's a matter that was of great concern to Kenyans. I'll tell you from where I sit. I am less concerned with what people say online, on social media. I had that engagement with somebody yesterday who is in this audience. And I told him, I have been called William Ruto's wife because I work closely with him. And I take it in my stride. But I will have to do my work and do it to the best of my ability. That's my concern, and I believe everybody within the Kenya Kwanza administration is less bothered by what people say online.
How can you say that when in the part one of this show...
Insults.
Hold on. In part one of this show...
Let me paraphrase
Irungu
that.
from Amnesty said a guy did an AI image of the president in a coffin was treated viciously, violently. That was not you having a thick skin.
And maybe because you never allowed me to respond to that. Because,
I think I did, but you can respond again if you want.
Because it's true what Irungu was saying and about the gentleman who had his hair shaved. And I said, because we are a nation that wants to trust in institutions. We want to trust and believe that the investigative agencies that are investigating all those cases where people have claimed to have been abducted and things done to them that are unpalatable, that we get to the root cause of it so that you know who is it that was abducting these people. I told you there are three elements.
It's a very simple issue. Irungu cited a case of a young man who did an image mocking the president and he was tortured for it. That does not speak well to the thick-skinnedness of your government.
So the question is, who tortured him? Can you or me answer? You cannot answer. You cannot say with certainty.
So. I'm going to trust the guy who was tortured.
Irungu says it is suspected to be because the gentleman said they behaved like they were security agencies. I have seen cases in Kenya now, and an unfortunate case in the recent past, about 2 months ago, where a gentleman who was a manager in one of the security firms was killed and murdered by thugs masquerading as security officers in full police uniform.
Okay, let's go to lady there in the red glasses and the stripy top.
Good evening. You know that the Kenyan public is suffering. So why are politicians flaunting their wealth, as has been asked earlier, and the wasteful use of public resources like helicopters to go to a latrine or a weird bridge opening, when the president claims that we are having austerity measures? By the way, very nice red bottom shoes.
Again, to the good lady, as I said, Kenyans are very active and very participative in many engagements. Many of them are usually not true. I saw what she refers to, that somebody was flying to go and open a pit latrine somewhere in Muranga. I believe that was today on social media. It's not absolutely untrue. In actual fact, the deputy president who was being reported to be that way was to join the president in the northeastern part of Kenya, nowhere in Muranga. So don't believe, again, everything you read on social media.
But what about what they see on social media? People can see members of parliament flaunting their cars, expensive, all of this stuff. It's out there.
Mehdi, I told you there's absolutely no excuse for anybody.
Have you cracked down on people in your caucus? Have you called up members of your coalition to stop doing this?
Exactly.
You have?
We, members of parliament in my party, in the house, who I see flaunting things that are not palatable with Kenyans, I tell them, hey, bro, this is not good.
Okay. We're going to go back to the audience. Lady there in the third row. Yes, you, if you want to stand up.
Honorable Kimani Ichung'wah, Mr. Majority Leader, at the beginning of this year, at a public gathering, actually, in fact, a funeral, you made allegations against the former deputy president. You said in a speech that those abductions were orchestrated by the former deputy so that he can put blame on the president. The former deputy president has been impeached. November, we had a new deputy president. December, there were more abductions, I think 7 from the Kenyan Human Rights Commission. The former deputy president is no longer in government. Who is responsible?
Good question.
Good question, and it's true. I said it in broad daylight in Bungoma County on the 3rd of January this year. You never heard the former deputy president dispute my allegation or even go to court if I was lying. I have since availed information that was in my purview as to what people were doing under the orchestration of the former deputy president to do the things I said in that funeral that they were doing and heaping the blame on the government of Kenya. And that's why, Mehdi, I told you, unless you categorize what is out of criminality,
you don't have evidence for your claims against the former deputy president. I
have said, and I repeat it, what I had, I gave it to those investigative agencies.
But you haven't presented it to the public.
That is the right thing to do.
But you haven't presented it to the public.
So do you want the investigative agencies to investigate people in public? Or do you
well, you're
allow
making
them,
accusations in public.
I was responding, and the good lady might know, I was responding to another politician who had said things in that funeral. And I responded and said what I said. There were politicians, by the way, members of parliament, 2 members of parliament, who had planned to mysteriously disappear and claim abduction. That is information that is with the investigative agencies. Okay. That's why I said on all these cases, case by case, allow the investigative agencies to do their work.
You said earlier in the show, people call you William Ruto's wife because you're so close to him. Do you plan to be William Ruto's successor? Do you plan to run for president once he's done?
As to my future plans in politics, Mehdi, I do not know.
Good, nice, honest answer at the end.
I do not know.
You're not ruling it out, though. That's my job as a journalist to always ask that question.
I do not know. If you asked me 10 years ago if I plan to be where I am, I wouldn't know. What I do is that I give the best I can give in public service to the best of my ability, and I give it all, and I believe the people of Kikuyu who elected me as a member of parliament can attest to the transformation of my constituency over the years.
Well, we respect you for coming here to give it your all. Thank you for coming to do this head-to-head. Thank you to our panel for coming to give us their expertise and contributions. Thank you to you all here in Conway Hall tonight for coming tonight and for your excellent questions. Kimani Ichung'wah, thank you so much for coming on Head-to-Head tonight.
Thank you.
And thank you all for watching at home. It's been a great show. Thank you for watching Head-to-Head on Al Jazeera English. Good night.